Historian, interpreter, teacher, these are just three of the words that describe John McCaskill. John spends most of his days working for the National Park Service. He shares his knowledge with visitors who stop by the various memorials in Washington, D.C. Now, when he's not doing that, John uses history as a vehicle to teach young people the principles of leadership and teamwork. He recently stopped by our WHRO studios to share some of his vast knowledge with our Lisa Godley.
History's been my passion since like 8 years old.
And it shows, because whether John McCaskill is dressed in character or giving a tour, he knows history well and can bring it to life. In the short time he was in our studio, he took us from this region's role in the Revolutionary War to the War of 1812, and of course, the war between the states.
Civil War. I mean, my goodness, you've got, the Battle of Hampton Roads. And when that takes place, everybody else's navy in the world becomes obsolete. I mean, you had nations that actually stopped building wooden ships to look at these ironclads. You've got Fort Monroe. And just outside of there was the great contraband camp. Well, a lot of those individuals ended up becoming soldiers in the Union Army.
John says it's fascinating to him that most people think the Emancipation Proclamation freed all the slaves.
You know, if you were a slave in the border states, January 1st, you were going to still be a slave. If you were a slave anywhere else where the Union was in control, you'd still be a slave. It only affected those slaves that were in areas that were in rebellion to the Union. But there's a small clause in Mr. Lincoln's January 1st version of the Emancipation Proclamation, and it says any black who wants to join the Union Army or the Union Navy will be allowed to do so. Now, prior to that, you could use them as laborers or blacksmith or whatever, but now they have the opportunity to actually fight legally. 180,000 individuals join as black soldiers. The numbers in the Navy, not as many, but if you account for everybody who participated, you've got over 200,000 people. Well, there are not too many stadiums in the world that can hold 200,000 people. That was a game changer.
When he's not giving tours, John does living history. When he dresses in period attire, which can range from a Union soldier to a Tuskegee Airman.
Hampton University had a CPT program, civilian pilot training program, where they were teaching college students how to fly. And they were doing this all over the country because they knew at some point we were going to need pilots. Hampton sent 2 of their students down to Tuskegee to learn to fly.
One thing he loves about history is that he not only gets to share what he knows with others, but he himself is always learning something new.
I didn't find out until recently that there were African Americans at D-Day on June 6th. All the footage I had seen, everything I had read, nothing. And come to find out, there were just under 2,000 who were there on D-Day.
Another one of his passions, teaching young people to be leaders. He uses icons like Reverend C.T. Vivian, who was beaten while trying to vote, and with blood running down his face said, "We are willing to be beaten for democracy."
Well, I had a school group one day, and we're walking up there, and guess who's sitting on the bench, on the mall? It was Dr. Vivian. And I saw him. I wasn't sure if that was him, and I looked at him. I said, "Is that Reverend C.T. Vivian?" And he shook his head. And I'm walking over to him. I got my hand extended. And before I get to him, I drop to one knee, and I just say, "Sir, thank you, thank you, thank you." And I must have thanked him about 20 times. I said, "Sir, you were willing to lay your life down for a generation you hadn't met." And this is what he told me, and I wrote it in my journal. He says, "Yeah, but I knew they were coming." Seeing character, courage, duty, honor, pride, commitment, service, sacrifice, in ordinary people, oh my goodness. And, there are lessons that we can learn. And so when it comes to leadership, when it comes to teamwork, there's so many examples in history.
And John uses those examples, especially when he teaches the leaders of tomorrow. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And I just love his enthusiasm. If you'd like to know more about John, you can visit his Facebook page at John W. McCaskill History Live.